Hello, and welcome to today's Unlocking Your IT Career Potential in 2022 event. This event is sponsored and produced by Actual Tech Media. We're happy to have you here for this inaugural IT career event. This is something we would like to do more often to help our audience understand the marketplace that's out there. Today, we'll be interviewing and watching presentations from top IT executives and hiring directors who want to share their expert advice with you to help you strategically advance your career. Before we get started, there are a few things you should know. First of all, I'm Scott Lowe. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. Before we get started on today's great interviews, let's go over some housekeeping. First, we want this to be educational and helpful for you, so we encourage any and all questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. We have team members and presenters responding to questions during the live event. Second, in the handout section of your control panel, you'll find that we are offering several items for download, including the 4 Essential Soft Skills PDF from Pluralsight. I encourage you to download now and share this with all of your friends and colleagues that might be looking for IT career advice. Now, throughout the event, we're also going to be giving away some prizes. There's a lot of great prizes here that are intended to help you advance your IT career. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, but the drawing has already occurred. But for those that are here live, the prizes are, first of all, a 1-hour career development session with top coach and author Josh Duty, 3 expert resume and LinkedIn profile makeover sessions with the resume review, and 3 one-year premium memberships to Pluralsight. Pluralsight is, the market-leading IT training site that's out there. It's fantastic. In fact, our very own David Davis, for many of you, will know from Pluralsight because he does a lot of courses for them. If you're a winner, you can also choose to donate the value of your prize to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to charities that you see on your screen. So, if you decide to make that choice today, thank you in advance. For winning prizes, the official terms and conditions for prize drawings can be found at actualtechmedia.com. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. If your name is announced as a winner during the event, we will contact you via email after today's event. And there's some important information about the prize drawings that you should understand. And before we get started, let's talk about social. You can follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, all the normal places that you would expect to find Actual Tech Media. And if you want to tweet about today's event or use us on LinkedIn or mention on LinkedIn, use the hashtag ATMITCareer. And with that, let's get on to today's sessions. So we're going to have a great discussion here. First up is Eric Riddle, an IT HR recruiter with Tech Systems. And he's going to have a discussion moderated by Actual Tech Media's James Green with nailing that new role, what top IT employers are looking for in their next hires. Over to you.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm excited and I hope you are for a great day of learning about how to level up in your career, how to grow, how to position yourself for success. And I've got a really fun first session to get things started. Because you're here, I know that you're looking for growth, looking for opportunities, and I've recruited, funny that I chose that word, I've recruited a great guest for this first discussion. Eric Riddle is an account lead at Tech Systems, where he helps Tech Systems clients find candidates for open positions they have. And Eric's been doing this for literally decades. And so has a great read on what's going on in the job market for IT professionals specifically. And so, Eric, thank you for joining us today. First question I have for you right off the bat is, what does the job market for IT pros look like today? Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there with your clients.
Yeah, thanks, James, for having me. I appreciate you taking the time to reach out and talk to me. But yeah, I'll kind of walk through kind of the state of the current landscape of the IT industry. A little backing up, I've been with Tech Systems for about 22 years. So all in a couple of different markets. So I'm originally from the East Coast and then moved to the Midwest quite a while ago. So, but been with Tech Systems and various roles in all related to recruitment and, placing of candidates, whether that be contract to hire, direct placement, or our professional services. So work with a number of Fortune 500 companies in Des Moines, work with some enterprise companies and then some mid-size companies as well, and then a few smaller ones. But most of my clients are probably at the enterprise to mid-market level. But yeah, really like when the pandemic happened in 2020, we slowed down a little bit. The industry slowed down a little bit. I think people were trying to figure out what was going on. But once they adjusted kind of to that remote workforce, really there was only for us a 2 to 3 week slowdown. And then the market just absolutely exploded. Clients still needed to get work done. Projects still needed to be delivered on time. And so the demand ever since then has been quite frankly just insane with the number of opportunities we have versus the people that are out there. So, a lot of these folks that we're looking for, a pretty highly skilled folks, whether it's from the cloud perspective or data analytics or DevOps type stuff. So, obviously these folks are hard to find. And the good thing, maybe that the pandemic, I shouldn't say good thing, but it's kind of shifted people to realize that people can work remote. And so there's more opportunities for folks out there now that maybe 2 years, 3 years wouldn't have been because obviously they were going into the office. They wanted someone to be local. Now it seems like companies are, hey, you know what, we need the talent. This is probably this current landscape or the position we're in. It's probably not going to end in the next year or two. I think this is kind of how we're going to do business for the foreseeable future, whether it's fully remote or hybrid or whatever that looks like. I think what you're going to see is people are going to be more open to, hybrid roles, fully remote roles. So I think the job seeker is going to have a number of opportunities to pick from. Just to give you an example, I was talking to a cloud engineer that we were recruiting a couple weeks ago. I might have talked to you this, James, earlier on one of our conversations, but he said that he was looking at 20 different opportunities just in the cloud space. So if I was going to tell someone, maybe, hey, if I'm looking to get into IT, or maybe I've stalled in where I'm at in IT, where should I go? What should I venture into? I would definitely say one of those areas you should look at would be like cloud technology, whether it's, the AWS side or Microsoft Azure or Google, there's a number of different platforms that you can look at. But I would say, that's kind of like a snapshot of kind of what's going on right now.
So you're kind of headed towards my next question, which is, are there roles in particular that are especially hot right now that your clients are asking you for that you just can't find the people for?
Yeah, good
Obviously,
question.
that's an opportunity for everybody watching this.
Yeah, I would say right now, with the cloud, obviously you see the commercials with Amazon and all that. I would say cloud technologies is probably one of the dominant, skill sets, perspectives, whether that's cloud engineer, cloud analytics, and different platforms, whether it's AWS, obviously they seem to be the leader, but, Microsoft's gaining traction there in the Azure space, and then, Google Cloud. And then there's some other ones that are, if you look at the quadrants, Magic Quadrant, they're a little bit lower on the scale, but everybody's looking at their cloud strategy, their cloud transformation. So I would say definitely cloud technology would be, whether that's the cloud engineer you can get into. The other area would be security. I attended Secure IO, which is a security event here in the local Des Moines area. And roughly yesterday, I think there were almost close to 400 folks that attended, but all, security professionals. I would say security engineer, whether that be cyber, third-party risk, things like that, governance area. That's an area that's really exploding. DevOps is another area. DevOps engineering would be another area that's that's really, really grown over the last 2 to 3 years, on just how people do things, whether it's in an agile environment and the sprints that they have. It's kind of like it's kind of changed the game, I guess, within IT departments on that. And then I would say the other thing that we're really seeing would be the data analytics area. Everyone's looking at like their data and how can they get faster and more efficient with it and things like that. So I would say that's a huge area. Like, how do they modernize? How do they transform? And then from like kind of more of the functional side, I would say, functional, non-technical side, I would say like more like on the project management front, with people in IT, like, agile, scrum masters, things like that. Those are probably some of the biggest areas we've seen growth in. So, and that's not just local, that's, national perspective.
So what I'm hearing, folks, is if you're in or moving into the cloud specialization space, security, DevOps, what was the last one, Eric?
Data analytics.
Analytics, data stuff.
Yeah.
All of that, there is more opportunity than there are good candidates to fill the roles. So if you're looking for opportunity, that's a good place to look. Real quick, are there any specific certifications or qualifications that people are asking you for a lot right now?
Yeah, I would say within IT, the certification piece is interesting. Some clients, and it's very few, like require, certifications. It would be nice to have if they have these. If I was an IT person looking, I wouldn't actively go out and get these certs. Like, obviously if you get hired at a company, a lot of companies will invest you to get your AWS Cloud Practitioner, test or, certification, and then, that you can rise the ranks from there. But there's a number of certifications within AWS. Google has some. Within security, there's a number of certifications, like the CISSP. A lot of times you will, your company, if you're working for a company and you're interested in that, make that known, be vocal to whoever your leaders are within that space. Because I think, who wouldn't, if someone comes to me and wants to get certified in AWS, obviously I'd be crazy not to say, hey, I'm going to fund that. It's just going to create more, get them more armed to be able to sell those services and be able to perform that work. So, a lot of times companies will pay for that. They have training credits that they can spend on employees. And I think a lot of times employees have to realize how they can change their game on attracting IT folks, with the resource that had 20 openings, if someone said, hey, we can pay for your certifications, that's just kind of a feather in their cap to maybe recruit folks too. Right. So I think that's huge, from companies that are willing to spend that money and invest in employees to get them certified. So I wouldn't say if you have time and you want to get those certifications, I think that's great. I think it shows that you're you're curious and you want to kind of, move into that next level in your career. But I would say, be patient on that too, because I think a lot of times if you get a good role, the companies are going to invest in you in getting those certs.
That's great advice. And so on the flip side of the equation, if you're a hiring manager, you got to know that, like Eric said, you're competing with potentially 19 other opportunities, like the cloud engineer you mentioned. So you have to be thinking about how you're going to attract that talent, and being willing to invest in their development is a good way to be attractive. Well, Eric, we're out of time here. I want to leave people with something actionable. So what would be your top recommendation for a candidate to position themselves to stand out?
Yeah, I would say definitely network. There's a lot of in the local chapters within like cloud, or whether it's DevOps or security, there's a lot of user groups that meet up, networking groups. Try to get tapped into that community, and whether it's just, sometimes they do like coffees, sometimes they do like happy hours. I would try to get, try to figure out who those local chapters are and go to those meetings. It's a little different now with the pandemic, but sometimes those are online now too. And it's just good to get your name out, even if you're looking to change into a different area in IT, and maybe you don't have experience there, it's just good to like kind of get your face, get your brand known, and be curious too. I would say like, you know, I think with security, especially like a lot of the managers, because people are so hard to find in this space, it's like they're really looking for like, you know, it's not just about the technical aspect of it. It's like, how do you problem solve? You know, what's your critical thinking skills? That's what they're looking for. So I think try to be curious. You know, there's a lot of industry articles out there on all these different technologies. Reading those and going to those meetings, and then just reaching out to people on LinkedIn, you know, and maybe that they'll kind of catch up with you and talk to you about maybe their experience within security. I mean, if someone's interested in security, I know a couple of weeks ago someone asked me the same question, and I just, you know, gave this person, you know, some contacts to reach out to, and they talked, and he just expressed his interest and, you know, how to get into security and what does that look like, and whether it's an unpaid internship or a paid internship. I mean, there's a lot of different opportunities, but definitely have to be a go-getter to go out there. And I think if you do, you're going to have plenty of opportunity to land something. And the salaries too. The salaries in IT professionals have really increased. It's unbelievable. Some of the money that some of these folks are getting for their skills. So.
Good deal. Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time, folks. I hope this was helpful, and buckle up. We got a bunch more great sessions coming. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, James, for that great discussion around what employers are looking for in IT prospects. Our next session is one that's near and dear to my heart, and it's soft skills. This is something I think is severely underrated in a lot of my experience in IT, but they've never been so important as they are now and as they're continuing to be. In fact, it's so important we have 2 sessions coming up to talk about soft skills. First up, I'm pleased to introduce Matt Peasy, Curriculum Director at Pluralsight. He's going to go through the 4 essential soft skills. Matt, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Peasy. I'm the Director of Curriculum here at Pluralsight, the leader in tech skills education. I'm here today to talk to you about the importance of soft skills in your IT careers. Being talented and performing technical aspects of a job at a high level can only take an employee so far. To truly become an exceptional team member, you must possess a whole host of additional skills that are harder to measure, but are critical to success. These skills are referred to as soft skills. The great thing about soft skills is they're completely transferable to any role you may want in the future. Spending time to hone and improve your soft skills will only help you in your prospects of long-term success. Soft skills are generally considered a combination of behaviors and personal traits that allow you to communicate effectively, collaborate with others, and successfully manage conflict. Having good soft skills typically means you'll have strong situational awareness and emotional intelligence to navigate through difficult working situations and producing positive results. This is especially important for leadership positions. Good leadership is more about managing people and directing their efforts towards a desired outcome, opposed to practicing any specific technical skills. As someone working in the IT or tech industry, what are the most important soft skills? And that's a great question. While it's difficult to assess what might be considered most important, I do find these 4 to be some of the most sought after on the Pluralsight platform. They are creative thinking, empathy, time management, and communication. Creative thinking doesn't necessarily mean artistically creative, but it rather means thinking outside the box, devising new ways to carry out tasks, solve problems, and meet challenges. It means bringing a fresh and sometimes unorthodox perspective to your work or problem you're facing. This type of thinking allows you to be, at a minimum, more productive, but potentially as important as being more innovative, creating new ways to perform tasks and solve problems. Some people think of science and engineering as the opposite of art and creativity. This couldn't be further from the truth. The fields of science, technology, engineering, and math are not only highly creative, but they need to be. Designing a more efficient process, writing an innovative new application, or developing a testable hypothesis are all highly creative acts. The technology industry consistently produces projects that don't work, and oftentimes these failures are due to people stuck in their assumptions and old habits. Technology fields need creativity to flourish and grow. Creative thinking is a perfect example of a non-technical skill that will absolutely make you better at your job. I was somewhat hesitant to add this as a soft skill, as I truly believe at its core, empathy is a basic human trait, and it's fundamental to who we are and who we become. That being said, in order for you to be successful, not only in your career, but more importantly, in your life, you must possess the ability to be empathetic towards others. As we move through our lives, empathy helps us interact appropriately and positively with other humans. It's this type of behavior that crosses over into your professional life to allow you to interact with coworkers on a more meaningful and impactful level. Empathy is about having a deep understanding of your coworkers and how you can use that personal understanding to increase productivity and accelerate innovation. True empathy means that you don't just understand how those you work with feel, but you feel it along with them. This makes you more equipped to positively respond to issues and more capable to resolve problems. Time management, by definition, is exactly what you think it is, managing your time. But what does it actually mean? Time management is about your ability to use your time efficiently and productively. Effective time management allows you to complete more tasks while getting them done faster. Think about those close calls on missing a project deadline when you had too much on your plate. Mastering time management helps you avoid this. Admittedly, it's a trial and error process, something you perfect over time. However, once you find a system that works for you, you'll find yourself working more productively. Time management is built through good habits. Some habits involve preparing for time conflicts, and others involve handling them as they come. Making use of a few of these tips can help improve your time management. Use a planner, schedule, or calendar. Prioritize your tasks. Set both short-term and long-term goals. Be self-motivated and organize your environment to help you focus. Learn to be flexible if things aren't going to plan, and schedule breaks for yourself. Learn to say no when you already have too much to do. Successful communication involves several components. Verbal communication refers to your ability to speak clearly and concisely. Nonverbal communication involves your capacity to project a positive body language and facial expressions. Written communication refers to your skillfulness in composing emails, reports, and other types of documents. Visual communication involves your ability to relay information using pictures and other visual aids. In my mind, active listening should also be considered a key communication skill, because it helps you listen to and actually hear what others say. You need to be able to listen to understand how to best communicate with someone. Without strong listening skills, any communication efforts will be one-way and probably ineffective. A main function of effective communication is having the ability to collaborate with others. Collaboration means working with one or more people to complete a project or to develop a new innovative idea. Collaboration allows you to work effectively together towards a common goal that benefits the team or company, which is a key characteristic employers look for in team members. Some of these skills we discuss may sound like characteristics that you either have or you don't. That's not at all true. All of these skills are things you can learn. With all learning, remember, practice makes perfect, so don't be too hard on yourself and give yourself time and space to fail. This will lead to growth and ultimately mastery of these skills. So how do you learn them? There's almost endless amounts of resources on the internet. Of course, we have a variety of training options here on Pluralsight, and there are other platforms like Masterclass that can also provide you with courses to help you grow your soft skills. Many universities offer short courses, and of course, there's professional groups that do the same. With that, I hope you have a better understanding of why soft skills are so important for your current and future roles. Thank you so much for joining me.
Matt, thank you for that great information around soft skills and what they are. Now I'm going to be joined by Amy Anderson. She's going to give us what she looks for during the interview process at an MSP in St. Louis. This is something I think is really important because it takes what Matt just told us and brings it to the real world. For our next segment, I'm happy to introduce Amy Anderson, founding principal in Anderson Technologies, an MSP based in St. Louis. Amy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
So Amy, first of all, before we get started, tell us a little bit about Anderson Technologies, and then tell us about the importance in your mind of soft skills in the MSP world.
So Anderson Technologies is a managed service provider for small businesses. We help with all their IT, from architecting to buying hardware. And essentially, we're the outsourced IT department. Soft skills are really critical. We consider it our secret sauce. Throughout our career, my husband and I own the company, Mark, and throughout our career, we've known a lot of very technical people. But as Mark always says, the secret sauce is when you combine someone that's really technical with someone who has professional people skills. And so that's kind of our brand, and it makes a big difference.
So, I mean, it makes such a big difference that you've really based your entire sort of recruitment and hiring process around all of this. Can you kind of give us the start, a look at the beginning of your recruitment process, and then we'll kind of go down the funnel until you've selected someone and understand how you look at soft skills in your process?
Sure. So when we hire someone, only 50% of what we're looking at is their technical skills. And we have high standards, so we want very strong technical skills. We're looking for things like, do they have cloud-based experience, Office 365, essentially a sysadmin networking skills, security. But when we're hiring someone, we can just look on their resume really quickly and see maybe they have some CompTIA certifications. Do they have Network Plus, Security Plus? And it's a quick little glance that says, okay, they're worth taking a second look at. But that just gets them into the gate. And then what I'm really going to focus on is the soft skills.
And what sets a candidate apart from the very beginning? I mean, when you advertise for a position, you probably get a slew of resumes or a slew of people applying for the position. What decision process do you go through to sort of take an initial stab beyond what you saw in their hard tech skills for the next step? Who are the first people you're going to reach out to?
So if I put, for example, a job up on Indeed, I'll get a lot of resumes. We might get 200. I mean, I can think of one person, we went through 400 resumes till we actually hired the right person, but that's unusual. So looking for, number one, if they wrote a cover letter, I'm going to look at it automatically. They've already gone to the top. Another thing would be in Indeed, you can have them do certain assessments. One of them is a phone screen. It's like a computer automated one where it'll ask questions like, I'm trying to remember. Oh, can you tell us about any skills or experience that might be helpful in this job? So what I'm really looking for is, how are they speaking over the phone? Do they sound professional? Is this someone that, if I had a computer problem, is this someone that I want to call out and I'm going to trust to like get into my computer and have all that? I'm listening for trust, although someone else might think the question is really about the technical skills. It's about both.
And when you're talking to this person, what are some of the indicators that they have the kind of communication skills that you're looking for?
Well, I'll back up a little bit, because before I actually talk to them, I'm talking to them via, sometimes it's, messaging, email, text. I haven't even talked on the phone yet. And I am looking at, did they capitalize their letters? Sometimes if you're just sending a little text, remember this is a professional environment. You're not just sending a little weekend text to your friend. So I pay attention to that. Because if you're starting to write a little abbreviations and maybe you do that to one of our clients, they're not going to know what you're talking about. I'm also looking at punctuation. Have someone definitely proofread. Has someone proofread their resume? Grammar. I'm trying to think. There's a variety of things, but the little tiny details matter, because if you can't get proper syntax in, say, your cover letter, your resume, how do I know that you're going to get a little tiny technical detail right on the job?
What do you think when you think about what you're trying to hire for in an MSP and what some organizations looking for with internal IT? How do you see the difference between hard skills and soft skills sometimes? Or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think an MSP is a little bit unique, although not really. But when a company hires us to manage their IT, they are giving us the keys to their kingdom. We know all their passwords. We can get into all their data. So trust is really important, and especially in this day with cybersecurity being such an issue. We also are often on the phone or going in person, and we're solving problems all day long. So that customer service piece is even stronger. But I will say, when I go back to the days where I worked in the avionics lab at McDonnell Douglas as a software engineer, and there were a lot of very technical people, but they didn't have the soft skills. And in my experience, the people that had both just excelled in their job. In fact, here's a funny story. When I first interviewed for that position right out of college, I was applying to work in the Artificial Intelligence Center. I hate to tell you, it was 1988. And the director of the whole avionics lab, this was his baby. And so he interviewed me. And the thing he was most interested in was that I was a camp counselor for 5 summers. And he wanted to hear all about that, because he had all these technical people, but they weren't able to communicate. So I ended up getting the job, and I was often put in a position where I was communicating. He would send me out on trips where I would do talks and speeches. And I think he appreciated my soft skills, and they served me well.
So really what we're hearing is the technical skills are basically at the very beginning, sort of the, okay, yay or nay, because they may have the tech skills. And then we think they may have the tech skills. And then you're looking at their ability to write and to communicate in person or over the phone or whatever the case may be by voice. And you do a lot of screening around that. And if they don't pass that screening, they don't continue on in the process, right?
Yes. So once I determine that this is someone who has potential, then I do a phone interview, and I do it on purpose on the phone, because I want to hear how someone is speaking and how they're talking. So yeah, they don't even get to talk to our technical staff at all. So, and then in the phone interview, it's all about that professionalism, like what's in your background? What are you wearing? How are you talking? Did you shower that morning? So I'm looking at all of that, and I actually tell them, I say, this will not be a technical interview, but I'm trying to figure out if you're a good culture fit. And it's a two-way interview. So I'm interviewing somebody, but they're interviewing us. And I think it's really important to remember when you are in an interview that you're also trying to figure out if that's the right fit, and you should be prepared to ask questions.
And assuming that they pass muster on the soft skills side, then you put them through a more rigorous technical assessment, and by that point, they can communicate. And if they have the tech skills they claim to have, then they could potentially be part of the team. Is that accurate?
Yes. So once we've got all the soft skills, and actually also kind of values and character. I'm looking for integrity, trustworthiness, and actually what we love, kind of our culture, is someone who's really bright and humble, and collaborative. So every company is a little different. So there's that balancing act when you're in an interview that you want to be bright and you want to share your strong technical skills, but you also want to be humble. I'm always looking for something in the interview where they said, you know, someone really helped me succeed in this, or they're giving someone else a little bit of credit for their success. But yes, you're right, Scott. So then if they pass all that, then we bring them in for an in-person interview, or they do some assessments. If they've got CompTIA certifications, some of those boxes are checked off. It depends what level we're looking for. And then I just give them to the technical team and they get to grill them and ask them whatever they want.
So I think the key takeaway for people here is that without the soft skills, the hard skills don't matter. You know, a lot of people talk about, I'm going to get more certifications. I'm going to go, you know, teach myself more stuff, which is great for a lot of organizations. But for, I would say, an increasing number of organizations, they're looking for people who can get along with others. And you're taking that really, I'm not going to say to an extreme, because it's not, it's an appropriate thing to do. But you're taking that to a level that makes sure that you're going to bring the right people into your culture. They're going to be customer centric, and that if they have the hard skills, then it's a perfect situation for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you could sum it up, it's that the little tiny details matter. Even things like response time. How quickly does someone get back to me? And when you do assessments, that's one other thing I didn't mention, Scott, is that if we see someone's potential, we do something called the Predictive Index, which really tells us someone's strengths. So we're going to be able to tell if they're really detailed or if they're flexible. And if someone's we're looking for a technical person to be really detailed, but for different jobs, like maybe sales, we're looking for someone to be really flexible. We want to make sure we get someone in the right seat in the bus. And then we actually do a cognitive test as well, which it's timed test. I believe they're 8th grade questions, but it's timed and it's fast, and it shows us how quickly someone may learn. And if you ever are doing a test like that, I would really recommend you do it when you're fresh. If for you, that's first thing in the morning, make sure no one's around, take the time, because those assessments definitely impact what we end up doing.
Amy, thank you very much for this discussion about really the critical role that soft skills play in the hiring process in a real world organization.
You are welcome. It's my pleasure.
And again, thank you, Amy, for that presentation. It's the soft skills piece can't be overstated. In fact, our next presenter is going to talk about soft skills a little bit more, but in the context of, oh, hey, look, it's me. So I'm just going to let you listen to me about the CIO role. The road to the CIO can take many forms and really many different paths. And we're going to talk about getting from here to there in this presentation. First of all, what is a Chief Information Officer? Generally, it's the senior-most leader of the technology organization. Now, that may mean that it works inside the IT department under another executive, or it could mean that the CIO sits on the C-level board of the organization. In many cases, the CIO is a former technologist turned business strategist, but this is changing in some ways where we see other people becoming the CIO because of functional critical responsibilities that they've held in the past. The CIO typically has a broad understanding of the business, impeccable communication skills, and a grasp of technology's potential and limitations. Notice that it doesn't say that they have huge technology skills. While that's possible, and it's often the case, CIOs don't necessarily have to be technologists first. The terms CIO, IT Director, and Chief Technology Officer are sometimes interchanged, but there are distinctions that are important, and I'll touch on this more in a little bit. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of pathways to the CIO role, and we'll talk about those as we go on as well. And I'm going to talk about my path to the CIO. I spent a lot of years as an IT Director and CIO, but I started my career way back in 1994, and it was in very technical roles, including network specialist, systems engineering roles, and roles like that. I did a lot of user support, I did a lot of programming and development, so I did a little bit of everything. My first foot in the management door was when I assumed leadership of the network services department at a private college in upstate New York. I moved into my first of 2 IT director roles, one at the National Association of Attorneys General and one at a private college, different one, in upstate New York. After that, I landed my first actual Chief Information Officer role in 2006 at yet a different private college, but this one in Missouri. Since then, I've performed interim CIO and other leadership consulting roles because I left my CIO role. I needed to do something else. But I also leveraged what I learned as a CIO, and I co-founded Actual Tech Media in 2012. I'm going to talk about my roles and how I saw them aligned with what CIOs are supposed to do and what the title is supposed to mean. Now, I mentioned that we're going to talk about the difference between a CIO, a CTO, and an IT director. We're going to do that here. When I was the IT director at the National Association of Attorneys General, this was very much in the vein of what you would consider a CIO or CTO role, but with a director title. There was some internal operational responsibility, and this will all make sense in just a second, but it was far more focused on external constituencies, namely the 56 states and territories attorneys general. We worked deeply with those attorneys general and their offices on the technology front to make things better. Now, we did have internal operational responsibility as well, of course, keeping the network running, keeping systems running, but it was very much more of an external-facing role to help those states' AGs. And that's one of the differences between a CIO and a CTO. So a CTO is often more external-facing, a CIO is often more internal-facing. These are not hard and fast rules, but it's just the way things have sort of fallen out in a lot of organizations over the years. As an IT director, you're typically more internally focused. So you're not as focused on the external constituencies, you're focused on IT operations internally. After that job, I moved to upstate New York again, where I became the IT director at Elmira College. This was very operational, very appropriately titled as an IT director. This was not a CIO role, which is one of the reasons I left. And if the CIO title were granted, it would have been very operational, but it really would have been a stretch given the organization. The organization was not prepared for any kind of CIO role, which is one of the reasons I moved on to a different role. And that's where I became the Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Westminster College in Missouri. I would say that at that role, they were equally strategic and operational in nature. We were focused primarily on internal constituencies, but it was an appropriately titled role. It was more of an operational CIO, but it had a strategic and transformational element to it, but a little bit less. And this is all going to make sense in just a second here. But it's important to understand that the CIO is not a one-size-fits-all sort of title. And it's an entire spectrum, as you're going to discover. There are typically, when we think about all of the studying that's been done of the CIO role, 2 different types of CIOs. One is an operational CIO, which is very focused inwardly. This role identifies areas of the business that can be improved, and then they go about improving them and helping identify those solutions that are going to make those improvements. This type of CIO is typically very bottom line centric. We've heard the term cost center associated with IT in a lot of ways, and that's where an operational CIO lives. In a lot of ways, they're the ones that are being told, cut costs, and cut costs some more. And that's one of the things those CIOs have to contend with. On the other hand, we have the transformational CIO, which is primarily focused on external constituencies. You may also hear the CTO role being used in this aspect here, and you'll hear about this in my conversation with Keith Townsend, CTO advisor, later on. This role identifies new ways to serve customers, but not those internal customers. I've never liked the term customers used for internal constituencies in an organization personally. This is a way to help support the needs of actual customers of the business. This kind of role drives innovation in concert with other C-level peers, and it's top-line centric, which means it's trying to improve the revenue picture, not just cut the expense budget. And when you really think about the potential impact for a role, an operational CIO from a financial perspective can really only have a limited impact because you can only cut budgets so much. But in a transformational CIO role, really the sky's the limit when it comes to what you can do in terms of top-line revenue and driving that. Over the years, there's been discussion about the death of the CIO role. There used to be a joke that CIO stood for career is over because that was the last place you could go as an IT professional was the CIO, after which your career died. Now, the new reality is that we're seeing a lot of other roles sort of emerge that have sort of come and gone in some ways, like the chief digital officer, one I didn't put here, the chief innovation officer, the chief experience officer, the chief whatever officer. A lot of these emerging roles are, kind of in my opinion, extensions of the CIO role, as it should be defined in the modern era. These are what transformational CIOs want to be in a lot of ways. Organizations come up with these fancy new titles to try to differentiate a different role from the traditional CIO role. Now, the fact of the matter, though, is that CIOs can still manage operational areas through a subordinate while focusing on forging new paths forward. And why is that? Because of reality. There are some pure operational and some pure transformational CIOs. However, there's not a lot. There are a vast number of organizations that have CIOs that fall somewhere in the middle. They have some operational aspect to their roles, and they have some transformational aspect to their roles. And this is a complete spectrum from 0% transformational to 100% transformational, and the same with operational. So the key is, where does your organization fall on this chart? And this is going to be something that you have to determine with your organization, what its readiness is for a transformational CIO versus an operational CIO. And here's why. The reality is that a lot of organizations aspire to being ready for a transformational CIO. I've seen all kinds of organizations like this. They say, we want X, Y, and Z from our CIO. However, they're mired on operational CIO challenges. They have networks that don't stay up. They don't have fully funded plans for desktop replacement or just things that aren't working operationally. In these instances, those CIOs are constantly putting out fires. And this is an organization that's going to be looking for ways to cut those costs that we talked about before. They're not going to be looking for ways to transform the organization as much as they might want to. They have to have a mindset change, and that's absolutely critical. And this is one of the reasons why I think we've seen a rise in alternative CIO titles, such as that CDO or Chief Innovation Officer and all those other things. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. In these instances, the C-suite and culture are not always ready for true transformation. And this is something that has to come from the top. An organization's culture has to be prepared for the kind of transformation that can come from a true transformational CIO. And as I mentioned, in reality, traditional versus transformation is a spectrum. Now, when we think about the critical success factors for a CIO, like what characteristics does a CIO have that make them successful? First of all, let's talk about technical capabilities. For an operational CIO, it's critical that they have some technical skills. They have to be able to understand what's happening under the hood so they can help address real problems. For a transformational CIO, a deep understanding of technology can be useful, but it's not critical. You don't have to know the difference between a flash disk and a spinning disk, although that's pretty basic, or routing types, or all the other stuff that goes along with being a technical person in an organization. Business savviness is really important for both roles, but it's more useful for an operational CIO, but absolutely critical for transformational CIO. And what I mean by this is the CIO really has to have some understanding of the business, but a transformational CIO has to live and breathe the business. They have to understand all aspects, the key drivers of both revenue and expenses. Culture is really important here. So when we think about an operational CIO, the CIO has to develop a good culture for the IT department, one of customer service, one of helping the organization solve internal business challenges. When we think about a transformational CIO, though, the culture aspect has to be an enterprise-wide discussion. This is the role that's going to be helping the organization as a whole forge a new path forward using technology. So they have to be adept at helping address cultural issues that may be blockers to making that happen. And that's one of the things we talked about before. If an organization has an operational CIO and they're looking at hiring a CDO or whatever the case may be, it's because they feel like their current CIO doesn't have the skill set to push the organization in a different direction culturally that's really critical. And I think that's something that people need to understand. And from a soft skills perspective, which has been a discussion today, will be a discussion today, this is absolutely critical regardless of the type of CIO you are. If you don't have soft skills, you can't be a CIO. Some of these soft skills are things like the power of persuasion or sales. It doesn't mean you have to be going and knocking on doors, but you have to understand how to persuade people to your point of view to make things happen. This is very useful for an operational CIO trying to get funding for a pet project or a need to do an upgrade, but it's critical for a transformational CIO that's going to have a much larger hill to climb to help an organization understand where it may have shortcomings and has to make deep changes to the culture or to the operations to get to the next level for business. Presentation and communication skills are important for an operational CIO, very important, but absolutely essential for a transformational CIO. This means you can speak, you can write, you can talk to people, and you can get in front of them in a room and actually do a presentation if you need to. And this means the board as well. You may be getting in front of the board in an operation-centric way as a CIO, an operational CIO, or in a business-centric sort of way as a transformational CIO. You have to also understand how to manage change, and this is important for both types of CIO, but to a different degree. The operational CIO has to be able to manage change and help people understand what the impact of technology changes may be. The transformational CIO has to help the organization understand what the potential change impact is for true transformation initiatives. So, how do you get from where you are today? I don't know where you are. You could be a network specialist right now. You could be on the help desk. You could be in an IT director role. You could be an IT manager role. So, this is going to be different for all of you. But how do you get from where you are to being a CIO? First, decide what kind of CIO you want to be. Now, there is more longevity in a transformational CIO role today than there is in an operational CIO role. However, if you are a very technical person, you may find more comfort in an operational CIO role to help get your feet wet because it's something that's more familiar to you. You're still touching the technology, but one of the things you may want to consider is getting into an operational CIO role to become more adept at the C-level sort of things, and then transforming yourself into the transformational CIO role over time. And that may mean a difference in education. As a transformational CIO, you need significant business experience, an MBA or both. You have to understand the soups and nuts of the business from start to finish. For operational CIO roles, certifications and a bachelor's or master's degree in a technical discipline will be helpful. It's not always required. There's a huge debate on whether or not degrees are required. For a transformational CIO, it's going to be really critical for you to have a more formal education or significant experience in your business so you understand how it works. And as I've mentioned, get in touch with your soft side. Discover the power of actual communication, not what often passes for communication. I don't want to paint a poor picture of IT people, but I have seen a lot of poor communication among IT people. Jokes about users, slamming users, all that kind of stuff. You got to be done with that. It's got to be over. You have to be thinking about this thing from a culture perspective. And every time people are out there making fun of users, well, that's never going to end with anything good. And that's not the only example of communication. You have to learn how to speak to your audience. And that means that if you're talking to users, there's no more use of technical terms. Just things like that. Things that seem basic, but are often so overlooked by a lot of people. And I've seen it everywhere in my career. It's something people have to get a handle on and fix if they want to get from point A to point CIO. And one of the things I can't stress enough is to find a mentor. They're underrated often, but they're vital. Find a current CIO or a C-level in your company that can help you advance in your career. Just find someone that can help you understand where you have shortcomings you don't even know about, and they can help you overcome them and learn what you need to learn to become a CIO that can help an organization forge its path ahead. And change your thinking. Start thinking in terms of teams rather than individuals, because when you become a CIO, you're not doing everything yourself. Your teams are having to do it. Think like that. What does that mean for getting something done? Nothing is ever again a technology project. Everything is a business project. And this kind of relates to the next point here, which is ask yourself and your peers what their jobs are. Not what they do day to day, but why they do it. One of the questions I used to ask my team was, what is your job, when we were working at the college? And if they said, I manage the network, and my next question was, why? And the purpose here was to improve student outcomes. We have to link what we do to the business outcomes, not just talk about this in technical terms. And again, learn to sell and persuade and get people to your point of view. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I hope you found it useful. And with that, we're going to give away our very first prize of the day. And again, while I'm looking up our prize winner, if you have questions, please make sure you ask them using the Q&A button in your console. We are answering questions live during the event in the console. So we are currently giving away a 1-hour career development session with Josh Duty. Our first winner is Ryan Wright from California. Ryan will be reaching out to you after today's event with information on how to collect, to schedule a time with Mr. Duty to help you get some information about developing your career. And we have our next segments coming up. This is going to be a great panel discussion. Real IT professionals, real IT career stories. We have Actual Tech Media's Jennifer Bergman moderating a panel of IT professionals who are going to be here to share with you their real IT career paths and stories. Jennifer, the platform is yours.
Hello and welcome to our next session. I am Jennifer Bergman from Actual Tech Media, here with real IT professionals sharing their real stories with you. Here with me today is Alexandra Hogger. She is in IT systems at Clark Schaefer Hackett, which is a top 100 US accounting firm based in Cincinnati, Ohio. David Kroenke is an IT director at InkCycle, which is a worldwide leader in printing technology located in Kansas. Also with us today is James Ide. James is located in Michigan. He is an IT and network systems with national telecom deployment, streaming Sirius XM music into business sites. Thank you all for joining me today on our first ever IT career event. Really excited about this panel discussion. Let's kick this off with David. David, what made you decide to go into IT, and how did you work your way in?
Well, growing up, I was always told that I could do or be whatever I wanted to. Maybe a doctor, but I hated school. So in my early 20s, I found myself married, having small children, and doing construction work. And after a knee surgery, I realized that I kind of needed to find a different path. I did have a few mentors in this, and I started attending classes and learning skills with the idea that I could be pressed to have to prove those skills at any moment. And I actually was able to find an entry-level position, finish off a college degree, get my foot in the door, and so my career was launched.
Great, thank you. That's really impressive. James, over to you with this question. How have you been able to further your IT career to where you are now?
Well, I'd have to say I learned most of my soft skills right off the bat at my first job. It was a very large global company with offices worldwide. So there are always people from the building, from other countries and all around. And that's really where I was meeting people. I'd be setting up meetings and talking with them and really honed in on my skills from that point. As far as my technical skills go, I'd say I really increased on coding because of the way that traditional IT has shifted recently. A lot of things have moved to the cloud and we need to deploy workloads a lot faster. So I learned to code, and from there, it's kind of helped me to deploy these workloads with automation and get moving a lot faster.
And James, just as a follow-up, how have you been able to jump around from company to company? How has that worked for you?
It's worked quite well, actually. That's probably where I've made most of my pay raises. Every time I'd go to a different company, it was a substantial pay increase versus the annual raises that I would get from staying at a company are much, much smaller. So I would say it was definitely beneficial to jump around from company to company, but you don't want to have that on your resume as well. So it is good if you do find a good place to stick with them.
Okay. Alex, over to you with this question. What are the best ways you have found to keep current in technology needed for your accounting firm? Alex, right now you're on mute.
Thank you. When I was new in my career, I would just do random searches for tech articles or browse TechCrunch. But the further along I've gotten into my career, I've realized that only researching relevant content to things that I know that myself and the firm are going to be working towards in the future, researching those topics in particular is definitely key.
And how do you balance your learning with, a job at an accounting firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as balancing, that is a really hard goal to achieve in IT, but I certainly manage. I found the best method is blocking off an hour every few days on my calendar so that I have time to, set aside for research and learning specifically, especially around times when we are about to begin implementation.
Are there particular busy seasons that you try to stay away from?
Yes, we have busy seasons. So the accounting firm I work for does taxes and personal taxes included. So we have all the tax deadlines that we have to take account for. So, between January and April 15th, without COVID, typically those are our busiest seasons, but those are usually the times when we can get the most done in IT because the accountants are so busy working, that's when, unless something breaks, that's when we have time to plan and, do the things that we don't have time for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do a question and I'm going to do a round to each of you on this one to get your perspective. Each of you has moved to different positions in different companies over the years. What was the biggest reason for your decision to advance to a new opportunity? And how did you prepare yourself for that next opportunity or next move? I'm going to start with you, David.
Well, first of all, I think the biggest push was just wanting to provide for my family, determine where I was going to live and where my kids went to school. But the underlying cause there too is trying to prove what I can do, just show people what I was capable of, and wanting to move into something more challenging.
Yeah, and how did you prep for that?
I just tried to master as many skills as I could. I tried to be an expert on everything, and some of those things were useful and some of them were not. But I just was really trying to prove myself, especially I think after my career transition from construction work to IT. I think I really tried extra hard to prove that this is something I could do.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time where you had to go and learn a new topic or a new technology just to
All
get
the
your foot
time.
in? Mm-hmm.
All the time. But learning things is actually kind of my superpower.
Thank you. Alex, I'll repeat it for you. What was the biggest reason for your decision to advance to a new company? And how did you prepare yourself for that?
Well, I realized, being in the first internal IT department at my former company, after all the building, breaking everything down and rebuilding from scratch, there wasn't much room left to grow. I didn't see a lot of potential for, growth in the technology aspect of that company. So once I realized that my career probably wouldn't grow much more with that company, I realized it was probably time to start looking into other, opportunities. And then as far as preparing for, the next thing, I was still fairly new in my IT career, so I probably could have prepared more, to be quite honest. But I did research the firm, and then after my initial call with the recruiter, I took what I learned from her about the current technologies, tools, and solutions, and I researched the crap out of those beforehand just so I was prepared. But yeah.
Sounds like you had hit a brick wall at the company where you were, and really, in order to grow, you had to leave.
Yeah, there was really no other choice. The only other positions that were above me were director of IT, and then above that was CAO, and I knew that I was not going to be in either of those roles. And honestly, that boss at the time, he said without having a college degree that I would never make it in IT. So that was another big reason.
And have you found that to be true?
I found that to be absolutely incorrect. He was not correct at all. Certifications are awesome and relevant, when it comes to IT. Not that there's anything wrong with getting a college degree. Of course, I think that's great, but I don't think that limits, somebody as far as their career. I don't think that that's something that should be considered a limitation.
Thank you. Great. James, over to you. The biggest reason you've moved on to a new company, and how did you prep yourself?
First of all, I really agree with David and Alex there. Great reasons, of course, and I've had a similar experience. I was in a help desk position in my first job, and like Alex, I got to a point where I felt like that was as far as I could really take it. And another big motivator, of course, was money. As in this career and growing a family, you tend to need more money after a certain amount of time. So I felt like it was time for me to go as well. As far as preparing for that, I did a lot of learning on the job and also a lot of learning off the job. I maintain a personal cloud server at home. I run it on Docker so I could learn about containerization. Back to my coding, I learned how to automate a lot of the backups for backing up the databases to that cloud, and just other things along that line sort of kept me up to date and kept my skills fresh with things that I may have not been learning on the job. So that's really sort of how I progressed from there.
Nice, thank you. And I want to again thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules for being here with me. And I'm on to our last question. And again, this is going to be a round circle one. I'm going to start with James. We're going to go back to you, James. So what advice do you have for our people on this event today, IT professionals trying to advance their career?
I'd say one of the most important things is to keep a good work-life balance. It's important to be a good employee, but at the same time, you don't want to give too much of your time to a company who's not going to give you that same amount of respect back. You really need a career to have the money to live your life and to have the time to live your life. And if you don't have the time to live your life, then the money doesn't really matter either, other than taking care of your family, of course. Also, don't be afraid of failure. I failed many times, especially on my first position, and those failure points were what I grew from most as far as learning and moving forward in the field. So really, don't be afraid of failure. Being let go from a job even could be another opportunity as well. So those are all good things to keep in mind when first entering this field.
Yeah, could be a blessing in disguise to move yourself further.
Very true. Yeah.
Yep. And I think what you were saying with the pandemic has made us realize the importance of that work-life balance. And
true.
Yep. So thank you. David, what advice do you have for our audience today?
I love James's answer on that one. And my answer kind of meshes with that. And that is that I believe everybody has a unique set of skills. And so if you can figure out what it is that you're really good at, that you like doing, then that just will add forever to your quality of life. And so don't be afraid to be a little flexible and versatile to discover your skills and the position that's really a good fit for you. There's just no point in being miserable because you haven't found what you're good at.
Right. Keep moving along. Keep moving along. Thank you, David. And Alex, over to you. What is the advice you would like to share?
James and David both had incredibly great points. And to add to that, my advice would be around interviewing. I've found recently that in interviews, never ever dismiss your personality. You should always make that shine through when you're interviewing. Companies nowadays, more than ever, seem to be taking personality into account, especially in roles like IT. That's actually what got me the job. Of course, with technical skills, but being a personable human being in IT, especially, it's not as rare as it used to be, but it's also not as frequent. I would say that, be yourself in an interview and, at least you'll stand out. But as, David and James both said, don't be afraid to fail. Failure can absolutely always be.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We are taking questions in the chat box and we will be getting back to you. So feel free, if you have further questions for David, Alex, or James, to please put them in the chat box and we'll be getting back to you. Thank you all, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was really great information. Thank you, Jennifer, Alex, David, and James. Now, this is going to be kind of a follow-on to that. One of the things we just heard them talk about was, staying current and, making sure you have some balance and all that good stuff. Well, we're going to talk to Mr. Ned Balavance, Ned in the Cloud. He's a good friend of Actual Tech Media, and he's going to talk to us about how the busiest IT pros manage to stay current. This is something that's always at top of mind for IT folks, and it's going to be for Ned to tell us what some of his...
Dutch humanist and theologian Erasmus once said, "When I get a little money, I buy books, and if any is left, I buy food and clothes." He is thought of to be one of the last people to read all of the available works in the Western intellectual tradition. Shortly after he made that statement, the printing press was invented, and that piece of technology allowed knowledge to expand well beyond the borders of just handwriting books, and it also allowed more books to be printed. He was quickly overwhelmed with what was available to him, and even though he passed away, those who he left in his wake would never be able to know all there is to know, especially in the written word. When I think about technology and trying to stay on top of the trends in technology, I'm reminded of this fact. You can't know everything there is to know. When it comes to technology and the trends that are emerging every day, it has done nothing but accelerate. It's ironic because technology is the thing that enables that acceleration, and it enables us to consume information, but it also generates too much for us ever to actually know. Bearing that in mind, consuming information about technology and technology trends is a bit like drinking from a fire hose. It's not very comfortable, you can't do it for very long, and honestly, you're probably not going to get that much out of it. So if we are going to craft a plan to stay abreast of emerging technologies and do some deep learning for ourselves as busy IT professionals, there's some things we have to put in place to actually accomplish that goal. The first one is figuring out what it is you actually want to learn. I know that sounds a little silly, but it's absolutely true. If you don't know what you want to learn and you're just consuming stuff willy-nilly, you're going to quickly find that you're exhausted and you haven't learned anything at the end. So we have to start with a plan. We have to know what it is that we want to learn. And that's largely going to be shaped by where you would like to go in a career. Now, I will say you should keep abreast of what's going on in the larger trends of technology. If you missed the boat when it came to virtualization 10 years ago, or cloud 5 years ago, or even Kubernetes now, it's probably a good idea to just at least know those big trends are out there. And they're pretty hard to avoid if you consume any kind of news about technology. That being said, The rest of what you learn and keep on top of is probably going to be shaped by your career goals. What is it you want to do in the next 2, 3, or 5 years? I think going beyond that is a little bit difficult to figure out. But if you're scoping it to that smaller range of time, okay, let's say I'm an operations person and I would like to move into management. I'm not going to focus all of my attention and all my learning time on the latest technologies, whatever's cool out there. What I should really be focusing on is how to become a manager. I need to find myself a mentor. I need to consume books and media that teach me how to be a good leader, how to be empathetic, and how to be excellent at communication. That's what I should focus on. So now I have a learning plan, and that guides me on the types of things that I should be pursuing. Let's say that I'm a front-end developer, and I'd like to move into a back-end development role. Okay, well, I should probably start learning more about the programming languages that are used in the back-end side of stuff, and probably join a few meetups or something like that, where I'll have other back-end people who can guide me on my path to achieving that goal. Once you have a goal, figuring out what you should be learning and staying on top of is going to get a lot easier. All right, so we have our goal. What's the next thing that we should keep in mind? The next thing you got to think about is, how do you want to learn this information? What do I mean by that? You've probably heard of different learning styles. Some people say, I'm a visual learner. Other people say, I'm a tactile learner. I have to touch it. The latest research actually suggests that everybody uses all of the different tools at their disposal to learn. There's certainly some aspects that are more favored, but it's actually more about a learning process than it is about a specific learning style. And I'm a great example of that. When I want to learn about a new technology or a trend, usually the first thing I do is read a little blurb about it, a summary or a white paper or something like that, to give me an idea of what the technology is intended to do and a little bit about how it works. Once I have that bare minimum, I need to go hands-on. I need to deploy that technology. I need to use it. I need to break it. I need to see where the seams are and try to apply it to some real-world applications. Once I do that, now I see where the technology is going. I will now listen to instructional videos. I will read documentation. I'll read a book maybe. I'll watch videos on YouTube. Doing that before I get hands-on with a technology means I don't have context for the reasons I'm being told things in a technology. And for that reason, I find it much more difficult to remember what I'm being told. Once I've used something and then you're telling me, oh, you used it that way, but really you should use it this way, and this is why, that clicks with me. Now that's my personal learning style. That's my learning process. It's very important for you to figure out what's your learning process. What's the way in which you learn information the best? And it's not going to be a specific medium. It's not going to be all podcasts or all books. It's probably going to be a mix of mediums. It's more about the order in which you use those mediums and the process by which you retain information. Because ideally at the end, you want to have usable knowledge that you can apply to new situations. That's kind of the goal of learning, right? So step 2 in this whole process, once you've figured out what you want to learn, is figuring out how do you learn? What's the best way that you learn? Now, once you figure those two things out, the next thing to do is actually learn the stuff. But when do you do that? That's a really difficult question. When can you make time to learn about new technologies and trends that are out there? Personally, I'm in a very privileged position in the sense that my main job is to create educational, technical content and deliver that across many platforms. Because that's what I do, I need to constantly be building new demos and playing with new technologies with the goal of teaching it to somebody else or expressing the way that you would go about a particular thing. So I'm constantly learning because that's baked into what I do. Not everybody is privileged to have that specific and unique career. Instead, a lot of you are daily practitioners who are just trying to keep the systems up and keep the infrastructure evolving or write that new piece of front-end software, whatever it is that you're doing. Learning should be part of your day-to-day work. Ideally, you should be looking for opportunities to learn and apply new technologies that are going to benefit your work and the business. Let's use an example here. Let's say I am a cloud architect and I am looking to automate infrastructure at work. I've been deploying all these things by just going to the console or the CLI and typing commands and deploying things, and that kind of works, but I'd like to become more efficient about it. Maybe what I do is introduce something like Terraform into my workflow process. And now I can consistently and repeatably deploy the same infrastructure. And now I can abstract some of the code that I'm using in my Terraform configs and reuse it for other deployments. By doing that, I've made myself more valuable to the company. I've improved the company by probably improving the speed at which it can deliver technology, and also probably making that technology a little more stable since it's consistently deployed. So I have increased my value to the company, and I have increased their revenue, perhaps. Most companies recognize that because of the technology-centered world that we live in, and the pace at which technology evolves, learning is going to be just another aspect of your job, and they understand that you are increasing your value to the company by learning on the job. So ideally, have that conversation with your manager and say, I'm learning about this new technology. I need to carve out some time to do that. And here's how I think it will improve our process. Most managers are going to go, yeah, that sounds great. I would love for our company to be more profitable and more efficient. Go learn that thing. If they don't, might be time to start looking for another job. And guess what? Learning about new technologies and making yourself more effective raises your value in the marketplaces, which is going to make it easier for you to either find a new job or argue for a better job at your existing employer. Now, if the employer is not willing to carve out some time in your workday for you to learn new things, and you don't have the luxury of just being able to hop to another job, even though the job market is kind of on fire right now, you're going to have to learn on the side. This is going to be your side hustle for a while, learning about new technologies and trends on the side. That is going to take a significant chunk of your time, probably more than you imagine right now. So the most important thing about that is to speak to your family and friends and let them know that you are going to need to carve some time out of your personal life to learn and grow for your career. Ideally, this will be a short-term thing. You will gain the skills necessary to get a new job at a place that does support you learning on the job, and then you can stop the side hustle and go back to enjoying your personal life. If you don't communicate this information to your family and friends, then they're going to get frustrated with you and not understand why you're ignoring them or not making time for them and instead making time for your career. By putting this as a time-bound thing, I'm doing this to reach this new goal, and getting the support of your family and friends ahead of time, you're going to avoid a whole lot of conflict in the long term. And you're going to get that new shiny job that lets you learn on the job, and you don't have to carve out that side hustle anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that you are going to do all of your learning and technology trend chasing within the workplace. I know most mornings as I'm having my coffee, I scroll through some feeds and I catch up on the latest technology trends. But these are big trends. I'm not trying to drill down deep. I'm just getting an idea of what does the whole landscape look like? And then if something piques my interest, I see if it applies to what I'm doing for work. And if it does, that's an opportunity to learn something new. The last thing I want to caution you about is beware of what I call yak shaving. The idea is you started out trying to learn about storage technology, and as you were implementing it, you realized you didn't know that much about iSCSI. So you delved into iSCSI, which led you to networking and how multimodal networking works. And then you were curious about fiber optics. So you started talking about fiber optics. And next thing you know, you're wondering about DWDMs and how you can properly align your optics. You have gone way too far down the rabbit hole of learning. That's why it's so important to understand from the beginning what it is your goal is for learning. If you have a solid goal and you've built a plan around that goal, you can avoid falling down a rabbit hole of learning, which by itself may be enjoyable, but it's not really in service of the larger learning plan that you've laid out for yourself. So that is why we start with what we want to learn, because at the end, that's going to help you from falling down the rabbit hole or shaving the yak or whatever idiom you like to use. All right, so let's sum up what we talked about. First of all, you need to figure out what you're going to learn, and that is largely going to be driven by your career. So you probably need to figure out what you want to do in your career before you come up with a learning plan. I can't help you with that. But once you figure out kind of where you want to go in your career, now you can formulate a plan for learning to move in that direction. The next thing you need to do is figure out, how do you learn? What's the best way? What's your learning process? We're not talking about learning styles here. We're talking about learning process. What is the process that allows you to take in new information, synthesize it, analyze it, and apply it to a new situation? And then lastly, you need to figure out when you're going to learn. Ideally, your work will support you in your endeavor to learn more and become a more valuable employee. And if they don't support that, might be time to find a new job. But like I said, you're going to have to do the learning side hustle for a little bit before you get there. Ideally, you will get to the end of your journey, and then you'll realize that you have to start the whole thing over again, because as I said at the beginning, there's no way to know everything, and there's always new technologies and trends emerging for you to consume. That is what is so exciting about being an IT professional, and also what is so deeply frustrating sometimes. Well, that's going to do it for me today. My name is Ned Bellavance. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you want to talk to me, you can find me on Twitter. It's Ned1313. I can also be found at my website, nedinthecloud.com, and there you'll find links to my blog, my YouTube channel, my Pluralsight courses, and everything else I do. I hope to hear from you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
As always, we thank Ned for being with us for a great presentation. He's always a good presenter. For many of you, you're working in end user organizations right now, but your next career step might be to want to work for a reseller, an integrator, or even a technology vendor. James Green from Actual Tech Media is going to come on again to moderate our next session with Mr. Eric Wright and Denny Armentrout to discuss the pros and cons of vendor versus VAR. James, back over your way.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us through a number of great sessions so far, and I'm excited to host you for another one. My name is James Green. I'm a partner in the VP for Content at Actual Tech Media, and in a past life, I was an IT pro. I worked for a couple of different VARs, as well as with some customers, and I particularly liked working on the VAR side, and I was always curious about what it would be like to work on the vendor side, although I've never done that. I work with a lot of vendors today. Have a little bit of insight into what that's like. But for this panel, I wanted to bring together a couple of folks who are on the VAR and vendor side to speak with you about what it's like to be in that world. And if perhaps that's interesting to you, what you would need to know and do to move into that space. So I have with me today two guests. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Denny Armentrout. You see him in the middle here. Denny is the general manager for a VAR here in Des Moines, Iowa, where I'm at. And in fact, I used to work for Denny. And Denny hires the best consultants, except for, that one time he hired me. That was a bit of a flub. But for the most part, Denny hires incredible consultants. And so his perspective on what makes a good one is going to be valuable today. And then Eric Wright is on the far side of your screen there. Eric Wright is, like you and like me, worked for a customer, and for many years now has worked for a vendor. And so his perspective here will be about what it's like to jump from being on the customer side to working for a vendor and building products and supporting customers. So it's awesome to have you both. Thank you for being here. Let's just jump right in. Eric, I said that I had some interest especially when I was working with customers, about what it would be like to work for a VAR or for a vendor. In your mind, it is a different sort of role. What are the pros and cons of a role like that one versus being an end customer?
It's a great question, James. And if you're passionate about technology and you're, like what we began as doing, right? Just curious, continuous learner. When I was in the customer side, literally worked for 2 decades running data centers and running small organizations, everything from desktop to servers to cloud. I really enjoyed being able to spread my wings. I was always going outside the lines of my team, looking to talk to the network people, to the storage people. But then what happens is you learn and you start to see what's going on in the industry, what's going on in other vendors, and then you realize you're actually too far outside the lines. And I never got a chance to really implement a lot of the things that I was excited to be able to explore. So when I moved to the vendor side and took that first role as a technology evangelist, which is what they used to call it before they were called developer advocates, it was a neat opportunity to be able to suddenly have this broad view where I'd already worked in the community and the open source side a lot, because then you could effectively live through the experience of this open community. Well, now I could literally affect all sorts of different types of environments, everything from a dairy producer in Wisconsin up to, a healthcare company in California, banks in New York, small mom and pop style shops out in Vancouver, BC. It was really neat that I could now span the world, span every sector, every vertical, as they say, which I always dread that word. But it allowed me to take my passion and actually see it out in all these different environments. So it was a huge win. If you're keen on exploring beyond what you can do directly today, you can really, really impact people, and you can touch a lot of technology. So it was a real big boon for me to be able to move there. The alternative, of course, is I had a greater responsibility. What I used to do as my side hustle was now my hustle. And as a result, I had to change the pace of normal, because before it was like I was squeezing it in the evening hours. I was doing it at lunchtime. Well, now it's a full-time gig, and you think, great, I'm just going to have all day to do what I used to do in 2 hours. Well, no, you have 7 times as much to do during that time. So the pace of movement and the need to stay on top of it was greater. It's a joy. I would never trade it. Personally, I've enjoyed the benefits on both being able to expand my passion, my growth, and commercially, it worked out much better. Definitely on the vendor side of the world, there's a financial opportunity, which is a nice little bonus.
Yeah, I will say, if you're hungry and you're looking to grow, either the vendor side or the VAR side are just so broad and so fast that you will accelerate your depth of knowledge and breadth both. And I've always thought, I can't quite put my finger on this, but my very first serious IT job was with a managed services provider, and that meant every day seeing, 10, 15, 20 different environments. And I think that was, I didn't know it at the time, but an incredible leg up, because I got to see how it happens in 20 different environments instead of one. Most people have to go to a new job to see a different one. And I think that served me incredibly well. Denny, so I mentioned that you hire awesome consultants. When you're looking for those folks, what are the top couple of things you're looking for that makes them a superstar?
Yeah, well, I love Eric's word, passion. Be passionate about technology. We've done quite a few engineer interviews over the years, and the one thing that we kind of home in on is, what are you passionate about? The candidates kind of rise above the fray when they get into kind of describing what they really enjoy doing. The ones that stand out are good generalists, but then they're great at something. So if you can find somebody that has that base skill, but then they're passionate about wireless or passionate about security, you can work with that. You can find them work, and that you can build a practice around, which we've done quite a bit of. Take somebody that's, kind of a generalist, but then passionate, about some technology that certainly is fundamental to what we do. And then the final thing that kind of seals the deal would be they're okay being uncomfortable. Get comfortable about being uncomfortable, because in consulting, if it was easy, you wouldn't be called. And so that complex, wow, this is a weird situation, we need help. And so you got to be okay being thrown into the fire. You can't tap out easily. And those are, qualities that, might not be always easy to put your finger on during an interview, but once you can identify that somebody's got that, it can go a long way.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. So about the passion, I think places today generally, I think, are cognizant of work-life balance and try and be very respectful of that. But when you find the candidate who goes home in the evenings and is doing Visio diagrams of the firewall or whatever, you don't want to ask them to do that, but you can tell, like, ooh, they're into that. They're going to be really good. So that's one thing is, you know, if this is you and you're thinking about this, what is that thing that you're still thinking about at 8, 9 o'clock at night? That probably is a useful skill to a reseller or an integrator somewhere. And then the other thing is about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. What I learned is it's okay if you also say, I don't know, as long as you've got the next step, which is who do you call now or where do you look? Just throwing up your hands and going, well, I don't know, that's not going to work. But nobody expects you to know all the answers. They just expect you to help solve their problem. So as long as you know, I would focus on building up the skill set, yes, but also focus on building up the Rolodex and knowing how you can get help if you get stuck, which means like networking internally, figure out who else on the team can help you, as well as building relationships with, you know, other vendors or whatever it might be. So on that subject, Eric, when let's talk about the vendor side specifically. What does it take to be successful working inside an organization like that compared to maybe different things it takes when you're at a customer?
Yeah, it's like wrestling a bear. You wrestle it until the bear's tired, not until you're tired. You really have to go a little beyond yourself for a while, and you have to, like Denny nailed it. Uncomfortability is something you have to embrace, because that ability to get through discomfort means that you can start to talk to sales folks, start to talk to operations teams, work with the development teams. There's all these really diverse personalities and styles of work in the organization. And in the end, you have to become customer obsessed. That's sort of an overused phrase these days, but we understand what it means. You have to always think in the context of somebody's going to pay for this service. When you work on the customer side, quite often you lose sight of that. Now, I chose to never lose sight of that. I chose to go beyond my team and make other people passionate about doing that. And in fact, I saw people really rise up quickly in the organization. So moving to the vendor side was not being afraid to get on a customer call. Like, it was uncomfortable. It was difficult, but I knew that I had to do that. Surrendering, right, the independence is actually an interesting thing. I was disco posse. I was a blogger. I had done all these things as an independent person. And when all of a sudden you're taking that brand, that name, that thing you built, and you effectively give it to your vendor in the trust that they're going to take your brand and carry it further, because they're giving back to you that you can do this. It's a beautiful thing. But now I had to then say, okay, I'm going to get on a sales call. And I thought, goodness gracious, my whole life has been avoiding salespeople. And now I'm on a sales call, but you can do it with integrity. You can do it by empathizing with what the customer experience will be as a result. And they detect it, right? Just the same way that a dog detects fear, a customer detects that you're not a salesperson. They know this person cares about the outcome, and they're a technologist. So you can really kind of nerd out and enjoy it. So I loved that ability of like just embracing discomfort, and then quickly, it's like, you ever see the movie Full Metal Jacket? They start at the beginning and they're all the guys getting their heads shaved. And then an hour into the movie, they're teaching the next class and they're leading boot camps. That's what you are. A year into working this life, you're suddenly watching somebody come in and they're green, they're brand new. And you're saying, okay, let's shadow the sales teams. Let's sit with the ops folks. Let's go to the engineering kickoff. And you can kind of really bring people through that experience. It's in the end, like the tech is exciting, but it's the human side of it that's so much more about what I love.
So, you know, I said that I was interested in making this move. The reasons were I was like hungry to grow more. And I gathered that in either a VAR or a vendor type of company, that's going to happen. I gathered that it's probably the case that you have compensation advantage in one of those companies. I think there's certainly exceptions to that, but especially on the vendor side, sort of in the same way you can like make risky investments and they may pay off big or you may lose everything. You can go work for like early stage startups and have, you know, some sweet compensation packages that if the company does well, you do really well too. So there are certainly advantages there. The bigger, more established ones where you're not taking such a big risk also tend to just pay a pretty good base. So like there is an advantage to doing this if you want it, but you have to know what you're moving into. So Eric, I'm going to stay with you. You've made this transition. What do you wish you had known when you decided you were going to take the leap from being an end customer to working for a vendor? Now it's been, what's it been? Probably 6, 7, 8 years.
8 years. Yeah. I just crossed the 8-year mark. And then not only going from working for, I worked for Turbonomic and now we were just acquired by IBM. So as of a couple of days ago, not too long ago, I became an official IBM employee by acquisition, which is kind of wild. Yeah. If I could go back to myself, I would say, you know, do it again, but take your risk of, you know, make the comfort of risk and push further. You know, I hedged very much, you know, maybe it's because I'm Canadian and I'm a little bit, you know, shy on some of that risk. But at the time, you know, I had to think about the bet, and you mentioned it, right? You are betting on the success of it. You're not getting equity in a company. You're getting options to purchase equity in the event of something that happens, either an acquisition or going public. Nothing is a sure bet. I've been on the right side of a decent bet, and it worked out well for my family, but I'm certainly not retired. Nobody is, right? So it just meant that I put work into it. So my CEO would tell me, he goes, he learned his lesson too. He says, I understand equity, right? Understands the thing that you're giving up, because your base plus equity is the long-term package. If you read any book about Amazon, they're a fantastic organization, amazing people. And they know, like, they actually talk about their salary caps because a lot of it is really based on the long-term view. So that's really what it is. In the end, understand your risk tolerance and think about the long-term value that you bring to that company and that it brings back to your family.
So something to think about there is, if you're going to especially work for a vendor, not so much with a VAR most of the time, but for a vendor specifically, the compensation package may be more complex, and you want to be able to understand that and maybe reach out to some people who can help you grasp that. So Denny, we got to wind up here. I want to ask you one last question, which is for anybody who's listening who finds this attractive, whether it's working in a company like yours to be a consultant, or maybe working for one of the companies you partner with, like an HPE or a Cisco or a company like that, what is something that they could do to start moving towards that, whether that's a development thing or networking thing? One recommendation from each of you, and then we'll call it good.
Network. You know, we can't find people. We're not willing to compromise and settle. Culture is such an important ingredient. You know that firsthand. We're after people that know people, right? We want a warm reference before we take a chance. It's kind of hard to unring a bell. You know, when you bring somebody on, you take a chance. So network is key. Build up that your brand, your personal brand, be known for something. It could be hard work. It could be certs. It could be experience. That would be probably my biggest recommendation is get known in your market and make some noise.
Cool. Eric, what about you? What's something that people could do today to start moving towards one of those roles?
Create. Become a creator. The only way you become a great writer is to become a decent writer. The only way you become a great video creator is to become a decent video creator. It's a labor of love and practice. And it's the way that you become an expert of brand, a recognizable source is by putting yourself out there. And it's tough. Danny talked about the discomfort, but it's out there. And choose a niche, right? I mean, Zamfir was the master of the pan flute, maybe because nobody else played the pan flute, but like we know him as that, right? And there are technical experts that become that person. And, Denny's a great example of somebody who nurtures that. We as a community want to create opportunity. Go to your peer network and just read, consume, and then create.
So I'm going to double down on that because I think, Eric, you and I have both found a lot of success in deciding to just create. And what was the result of that? Well, I got better at my practice because, to write an article about something, I had to understand it well enough to not sound dumb. So I got better at what I was doing. Because it was published, I got known, which goes to what Denny was saying. And I just not that long ago looked at the first article I ever published. It was terrible. But to your point, you got to just start. And a bunch of people told me that, and I've now passed that advice on to 100 other people. I think that's great advice. Start a little journal even. Don't even publish it at first, but just pick a topic you wish you were better at and write a little even fake article about it, and you'll be better for it. And then someday put that out into the world. I think it'll work out for you. Well, thank you guys both for offering your advice here to aspiring VAR or vendor IT pros. It's been fun chatting with you folks. I hope this was helpful. And if you want to talk more about what it might be like, we'd be happy to chat with you. You can send a message in the Q&A. We'll be there and answer your questions there, or find us on Twitter, and we'll continue the conversation after the event's over. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
James, Denny, Eric, as always, thank you for your insights. All of this stuff is incredibly important. We're going to be giving away a couple more prizes. We're going to give away LinkedIn and profile makeovers, along with resume and cover letter reviews. This is, this stuff's important, believe it or not. A lot of people may not believe this, but it's actually can put your best foot forward, can really be improved with an expert looking things over. We have 3 winners of a resume and LinkedIn profile makeover session. We have Michelle Hall from Idaho, Charles Schaefer from North Carolina, and Chrissy Willis from Kentucky. Michelle, Charles, and Chrissy will be reaching out to you after today's event with information on how to collect your winnings and how you can get that makeover session scheduled. We have just 2 more segments for today. We have, next up is around certifications. This is something that comes up a lot. And we've heard a little bit about it today. We've touched on it a little bit. But now we have Actual Tech Media co-founder, partner, and V-expert David Davis, and the normal voice of Actual Tech Media events, if you've been on our events before, here to dive even further into the certification and learning that you need to get under your belt to prepare for 2022. David, thanks for taking on this important topic for our audience. It's going to be important for people to understand.
I am a certification junkie, or at least I was for quite a few years before I ran out of time to pursue certifications. I am an AIX certified professional, a Sun Solaris certified administrator, bonus points out there for anyone who recognizes this one, a 3Com 3 Wizard master. Let's see, I've got my Linux Plus, my Security Plus, my VMware certified professional, VMware certified advanced professional, Cisco CCNA, CCNP, CCIE, the CISSP. Yes, I am a certified ethical hacker. I have my Microsoft MCSE, an AWS cloud practitioner, and more. There's a lot of certifications I'd still like to pursue. I love certifications because they give you a plan for some level of expertise or a technical skill that you need to obtain, and then they verify that you have indeed obtained it. So it's kind of like a badge of honor for yourself. But for employers, it's even better because it's an independent verification that you do indeed have knowledge on a specific skill. But before you get started with certifications, today, you might feel a little bit underwater. Maybe not as zen as this guy here, but you might feel a little bit underwater in terms of your career in IT and maybe even your life goals. You might feel a little bit more like this guy here in the data center, just kind of overwhelmed by technology. And so that's why I think it's first important to just step back for a moment. I mean, certifications aren't a silver bullet. They're not going to just instantly get you the job that you want in the area that you want. Certifications are just an important piece of the puzzle. And the puzzle sometimes kind of looks like that. Maybe it looks more like this, but it doesn't have to be so confusing. So let me give you some steps, hopefully, to set you in the right direction when it comes to your career and your certifications. The first one being simply to have life goals. I mean, step back for a minute. I know it's really hard. It's hard for me as well, but have some goals in your life, and then let your career or let your life goals drive your career goals, and then let your career goals generate a career plan. And it's that plan that's really going to help determine what certifications you should pursue. So that career plan drives your certification goals, because after all, certifications aren't a career. They're going to help you in your career, similar in concept to, for example, a college degree or a university program. They're an important piece of the puzzle, but they aren't going to instantly be that silver bullet that some folks, kind of make them out to be. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's take for an example, that you have life goals, you have a career plan. You need to then match your career plan to skills. And skills are made up of a lot of different things, right? You don't instantly have skills just by going to a training class. You'll get a few. You get most of your skills through experience, through gaining competence and knowledge and hands-on, lab time or work time, working at a company, doing real-world projects. So skills can be difficult to obtain, that ability. And that's really what employers are after. Certifications can help you to obtain skills and help you to kind of map out those skills. But first, you need to have that career plan in mind. And there's a number of different directions that you can go. Of course, you could choose a managerial direction for yourself, and you might have skills like leadership, planning, strategy, communication, or organization as part of that. On the other hand, you could choose a technical direction where you might need to learn programming languages, operating systems like Linux or Windows, software proficiency like containers or Kubernetes or VMware vSphere. You might need technical writing skills, project management, data analysis, or engineering, depending on the technical direction that you take. So first, you need to kind of help your career plan drive whether or not you're going to go a managerial or a technical direction. And then from there, let's say that you go in a technical direction. There's a number of different job roles that you can choose from. It might be engineer or admin or developer, architect or support. Or maybe you go the managerial direction, and then you have job roles like IT manager, project manager, director, or CIO. So keep those job roles in mind. And once you've used your career plan to identify the specific job role that you're looking for, I highly encourage you to go out there and look for specific jobs that you want to obtain. For example, maybe you want to be, let's say that you wanted to be a cloud engineer, for example. I went out to LinkedIn last night, looked at jobs out there, and identified this job from Citibank. This is a real job. You see the link there in the bottom for a cloud engineer. And so if we look at the skills that are required for this, for example, they're looking for database skills, knowledge of distributed clouds, software development, the software development lifecycle, CI/CD, Terraform, Ansible, and there are certifications around those products. And then specifically, they list out the AWS Solutions Architect, Cloud Security certifications, the OpenStack Admin certification, and yes, a bachelor's degree is an important part of the equation for obtaining this job. But don't just look at one job. Of course, look at multiple jobs because they're going to be different. For example, if we look at this job at Slalom, which is a large nationwide consulting organization for a cloud engineer. They're looking for someone well-versed in AWS, Azure, or GCP. You need to know how to solve cloud problems and understand cloud tools and automation. These are things that you would learn in a certification program. And then they do say that cloud certifications are desired, as well as understanding the business goals. Of course, that's always going to be important, and we shouldn't leave that out. But a certification in the case of this job could be highly beneficial, being well-versed in a specific cloud, being able to solve cloud problems, and use cloud tools. So once you've selected a certification based on your career plan, the skills that are required, you want to, choose a certification that's not only going to help you to learn something new. Yes, that's okay to do if you just want to, but most of us have limited time and limited money, and we're pursuing a certification to help our career. And so it's important to tie that back to our career plan and career goals. Of course, when choosing a specific certification, the factors to consider are the popularity of the certification. You don't want to always just jump on the bandwagon if it's something that you're not truly interested in, but the popularity of the certification is going to drive its value. Recruiters are going to be looking for that specific certification, and there's going to be a lot more resources available to you to help you achieve that certification. Blog posts, training courses, books, certification guides, all sorts of YouTube videos. A lot of different resources are going to be available based on the popularity. And then, of course, be realistic in the certification that you choose. If you're, for example, looking to become a cloud engineer, but you've never worked with cloud technologies before, choose an entry-level certification in the area that you want to learn, and then go from there. So let's say, for example, that you want to be a cloud engineer. How are you going to put all the puzzle pieces together? Well, first off, you have to look at the exam blueprint. That's going to be your master plan. So if we take the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification as our example, you go to the homepage for the Cloud Practitioner, you'll find right there on the homepage, there's information on the exam. This is a foundational exam. It's 90 minutes. It costs $100, which is a nominal fee. There is a $20 practice exam available. And then check out the exam guide. They call it the exam guide. I call it the exam blueprint. It's the same thing. This is going to be your guidebook for the exact knowledge that you need to obtain in order to prepare for this certification. And specifically hone in here on the domains. The domains tell you exactly the breakdown of what's important and what's not. And then thankfully here they detail in bullet form everything you need to know in each of these different domains. So this is a very valuable resource. I put this in OneNote, I break it down into different notebooks, and I examine every one of these domains and have intricate knowledge of every one of the bullets on the domain exam guide. And then from there, of course, you need to request support from your employer. I think this is important. Make sure you have their support if possible. In many cases, they'll help you to, set aside time from your day-to-day job to prepare. They might help to prepare for help to pay for the exam or the materials that you'll need, the training courses, for example. And then from there, create a study plan. As we said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So you got to have a plan when it comes to studying. Make sure that you gain hands-on experience. You want to go into AWS, for example, spin up an instance, create an S3 bucket, get some real hands-on experience. Don't just read. You want to have real lab time, get some real knowledge. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. Of course, you're going to schedule time to study. You're going to schedule that lab time, and you're going to take some practice tests. There's a lot of different practice tests available. make sure you block off time on your calendar and set SMART goals. Of course, those are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And then practice taking the exam. Pluralsight has practice exams. AWS Education has practice exams. And then block out time for the test day, and you will be prepared to pass and pass the first time. And once you pass, you'll be on top of the world. You will achieve your exam certification goals. Those will help you to achieve your career goals, and that will help you to achieve your life goals. Not only will you feel great and confident, you will have learned new and valuable skills, and very likely your paycheck will show it. Now, before we go, if you truly do want to learn more about cloud computing, I have to recommend that you check out my most popular course of all time, my Fundamentals of Cloud Computing course over on Pluralsight. It'll walk you through creating an instance in AWS, for example, an instance in Azure, creating an S3 bucket, and more. And then, of course, our friends at Pluralsight have some great resources. For example, if you do want to achieve the AWS Cloud Practitioner, they have some great study guides. They have practice exams. They have lab environments and video training. And then one of the questions that came in for this event today was, what should I learn for the future? What skills are going to be valuable in the future? And Pluralsight has a great blog post on this, the skills that you need to know for 2025, what's going to be hot, mobile internet, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, Internet of Things, advanced robotics, biometrics, 3D printing, genomics, and yes, blockchain. So make sure you check out that resource. And my final piece of advice is never stop learning. Continuous, never-ending improvement, and you will have a great career. If you want to check out any of my Pluralsight courses, there are 90 of them over in the Pluralsight library, just 90 of the 7 to 10,000 maybe plus courses in the Pluralsight library. And also, don't forget to join us on upcoming Actual Tech Media events. We've got our MegaCast, EcoCast, and Summit events. This is a great way to stay up to date on the hottest IT events, the most cutting edge technology out there. Get all your questions answered with top experts in the industry and have a chance to win our incredible lineup of prizes at Actual Tech Media. You can do that at events.actualtechmedia.com or just watch your email inbox for invitations to our upcoming events. I hope to see you there. Have a great day, and don't forget, never stop learning.
That was a really great presentation, David, and it's a topic that's always top of mind for a lot of IT folks. And for our final session of the day, though, we're going to be joined by my friend Keith Townsend, who is the CEO at the CTO Advisor. And wrapping up today's event, we have Keith Townsend with the CTO Advisor. Keith, thank you for joining us today.
Scott, good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, the Chief Technology Officer, or CTO role, is aspirational for a lot of IT people, and there's lots of different ways we can get to that role. Why don't you give us an overview of what a CTO actually does? And then we'll talk about some different ways that people get into a role like that.
So, I get this question an awful lot, Scott, because people confuse the CIO role, which you've been in your past, and the CTO role. And then they'll look at someone like you. You're fairly technical, but a CIO doesn't necessarily have to be technical. A CTO is that main executive that aligns the business objectives to the actual technology architecture. So if you can think of an enterprise architect, but in a much more executive role. He can be a single contributor in one sense of the phase, and then he could have a staff in another sense of the phase. So there's different variations, but the core of it is that this is a C-level role that is very, very much focused on the bits and speeds and feeds and the technology itself. Then you have two different paths that we can get into. There's the vendor CTO, and then there's the enterprise IT CTO.
Yeah, let's start with the enterprise IT side of things, since that's where the brunt of the audience is going to be. But I want to talk about vendor side as well, because I'm sure there's people in the audience that'll be interested in working for a vendor at some point. But we think about the enterprise IT side. What's a typical pathway? Like, where do people start? How do they progress in their career? What kind of education do they need? Certifications, knowledge, skills, experience to get from basically point A to point CTO?
So let's talk about the really hard part first. And this is the part that I get a lot of questions on, which is the non-technical skill. Basically, you need to be able to map what you're doing from a technology perspective to the business objective. Let's say that you're a manufacturing company and you take a part of my career. You manufacture highway safety products, and you support an engineering staff. You support a back office accounting staff, et cetera, et cetera. You need to be able to zoom out, see that big picture, align that to the technology paths you're taking, whether it's deciding, whether or not to use, in my case, back in the day, frame relay or MPLS, and how that impacts the accounting side of the house and how that enables the actual technology, but being able to go in front of the CEO of a small publicly traded company and make the argument for that. So first off, it's the business skill, and you need to be able to acquire that business skill. There's, I think, two ways to do that. One, you can go back to school, get an MBA, or in my case, I got a master's of IT project management because I already had the technical skill and I had already done some management work. So I didn't want to have too much of a focus in business. Or you can do a stint in a non-IT role. You can take on a BCDR role where you're talking to the business as a analyst and understanding the applications and the various interconnections with the business and operations. Or you can, go the extreme route, which I did, was to go to one of the big four consulting companies that's always looking for deep technical talent and willing to teach the business side.
Yeah, and I think whether it's a CIO or CTO role, understanding the business is imperative, and that's I see. I see a lot of IT people that don't always want to look at that side of things. They're very, very invested in technology, but they're not always understanding or appreciative of what that is actually supporting. And I think those people who take an interest in understanding sort of what the technology bits and bytes are supporting are going to have a much more successful pathway in front of them than ones that are just focused on the bits and the bytes, which is not to say that's bad. Some people just have different interests and different skills. So if I'm in an admin role right now, what is short of going to get an MBA? Are there things I can do internally to begin to gain the skills that I need to be able to become a CTO?
Absolutely. You can do some basic things like just talk to users. We IT people, we like to do what we do, whether we're doing it in a tobacco company, or manufacturer, or finance services company. We kind of like to do what we do. And that's perfecting being a V admin, being a Kubernetes admin, being a developer. But in reality, what we do supports the business. And we have people at the end of the services. The simplest thing to do is just go talk to those people, get interested in what they do and how technology enables or hinders their job.
So if we look at the technology side of things, so we focused on understanding the business, what technology capabilities do I need to have as a CTO? Do I need to be getting at the command line to all of my switches? I mean, what kind of technology skills, experience, and should I have in my belt, and what will I be doing day to day?
And this is where the job slightly differs between the vendor CTO and the enterprise CTO. The enterprise CTO is typically extremely well-rounded. They understand application development. They understand networking, storage, compute, governance, super important. So, compliance, change management, configuration management. You need to be extremely well-rounded because you're looking at the big picture. You understand why Kubernetes matters to an application development team, but also why it wouldn't matter as much to someone supporting COS apps. You understand like big picture, what would be EVPN, VXLAN, but not necessarily how to configure any of it. It doesn't hurt to be a domain expert in one of these matters, but you definitely want to understand the big picture because you stitch, just like an enterprise architect, you stitch it all together between the teams. Versus a vendor CTO, you're probably going to be pretty technical. You're probably going to still be an application developer, or you're going to know the product in which you sell extremely well to the point that you probably know you can probably get to do some of the code review, etc. Day to day, what are you doing day to day? Day to day, again, it's less about getting into the technical weeds and more about managing relationships. If you're transforming into a DevOps operation, what does that mean for the SAP team and the roadmap? Depending on the size of the organization, you may be creating that roadmap for each individual silo. For a larger organization, you may be coordinating between the teams, the application development team, the operations teams, the architecture teams, etc., and just providing that vision and map, and honestly been in a whole lot of meetings.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, on the enterprise IT side, and I want to go back to the vendor side in just a second. Basically, if I'm a CTO, I don't need to understand every single basically function, feature, nuance of every single device out there. It's better for me to understand the primary features and the interrelationships between all technology, to understand how to bring it all together as a big puzzle to create a beautiful picture for the organization. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. You need to understand, more importantly, how to triage, because that's a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
What's important for you to understand, what's important for others to understand, and what's important for you to simply just outsource. Like, we're seriously getting to the point that we should be questioning, should we dedicate resources to internal resources for managing something like vSphere?
Right.
Is that important versus having staff learn Kubernetes or cloud technologies in general? I'm not a big, proponent of Kubernetes everywhere, but I am a big proponent of the small things that don't differentiate in your business. And again, this is where it goes to the business skill. Is having staff that knows vSphere down to the VCDX level or even VCP level, helping my organization move the ball versus my competitors or the rest of the industry. If it's not, how do I get that skill and that capability within my organization without having my people focus on it?
Let's talk to the vendor CTO side as we wrap up our discussion here. What's the genesis of a vendor CTO in comparison to an enterprise IT CTO?
So actually, there's two types of vendor CTOs. You might realize or seen the title field CTO, which is more of a sales marketing role.
Yep.
In which you're just going out and you're talking to end users, looking at their environment, helping them decide on what technologies and technology stack to sell you. Almost always what we call carry a bag, meaning that you have some type of quota, whether it's number of customers to meet, overall sales of the organization, but it's a sales focused organization. When you think about technical CTO, I think it's someone like Matt Wallace over at Faction Inc., who actually is helping develop the product. He's talking to the product development team, he's talking to customers, he's talking to partners, and he's understanding the market need and helping to shape the product. He may not actually code the product, but he has his finger on the pulse and his hand on and his foot on the scales and helping to direct the product, the product development.
So Keith, this was a great discussion, and what it really conveys to me is that if I'm an IT person with a CTO goal in my future, there's a lot of different ways I can get there. There's a lot of different pathways. It's just all going to take a different set of skills than maybe I've used up to this point to get to the admin or engineer level of my career. And it's going to mean a more focus on the business. If you're looking at the vendor side, understanding product, and also understanding potentially marketing, like to your point about field CTOs. So it seems like it's a pretty exciting. I mean, it's kind of exciting when you think about it. I mean, sort of the sky's the limit when you think about this kind of a role.
Yeah, I'm just as overwhelmed from when I got my MCP Windows 95 and thinking about where could that take my career and where could I go. I was just mentoring someone earlier today, and they said, one of my employees, and they were like, man, I can go anywhere. Help me understand where to go. I'm like, you know what? Where's your passion? Because just like technology, you can literally go in any direction. The same thing with the CTO role. You can follow your passions outside of just technology, almost anywhere it takes you. And it's always worthwhile, the journey.
Keith, thank you so much for joining us for today's IT career event.
Scott, thanks for having me. Good luck to everyone. If anybody has any questions for me, DMs are open at CTO Advisor.
I was going to say that. Thank you so much. As always, thank you to Keith for that great discussion. We always have some really fantastic chats, and I appreciate that. Before we wrap up, we have one critically important final point of order we have to deal with, and that's giving away our last prizes. Let me bring up the right sheet here. And our last 3 winners are going to win 1 year of video training membership at Pluralsight. And the 3 winners are Sandy Herrera of Utah, Kenneth Lim of Virginia, and Jared Rissler of Missouri. First of all, we'd like to thank everyone for participating today. Congratulations to all of our prize winners, and we'll be in touch with all of you via email. On behalf of Actual Tech Media, I'd like to thank our presenters and panelists for a very informative and helpful career event, as well as all the insights from everyone in Q&A. We had a great set of questions that came in. I'd also personally like to express my appreciation to Jennifer Bergman of Actual Tech Media, who put together today's event. She was all of the glue that brought this entire thing together. So without her efforts, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you, Jennifer, for your tireless efforts to make sure this thing went very, very well. And I'd also like to thank the Actual Tech Media events team for making this event possible in general. We run a lot of events at Actual Tech Media. They're very difficult sometimes to pull together, but the events team does it with grace and with professionalism every single time. We have a fantastic team here at Actual Tech Media. And this concludes today's event. Please bear in mind, those of you that won something will be reaching out to you after the event. For everyone, please have a wonderful and safe rest of your day and even your week. Thank you so much.